an original story narrated exclusively for Love Written in Silence. The rain lashed against Eleanor Ashcomb's face as she stumbled through the darkened forest, her once fine dress torn and muddied beyond recognition. Behind her, the echoes of her family's final decree still rang in her ears. She was to disappear, her reputation too damaged to salvage. Through the curtain of water, a tall figure on horseback materialized, the Duke of Dunmire's stern face, illuminated by a flash of lightning as he extended his hand toward her. His eyes narrowed not with judgment, but with a quiet fury at finding a noblewoman abandoned to the elements. Eleanor hesitated, her fingers trembling as they hovered inches from his, her last shred of dignity, making her wonder if accepting help meant surrendering what little remained of her identity. Eleanor Ashcombe ran blindly through the forest, each raindrop striking her face like a tiny accusation. The storm had begun hours ago, shortly after her half-brother had deposited her at the edge of the county, with instructions that were painfully clear. She was to make herself scarce, to remove the stain of her presence from the family name. Find distant relatives, a position as a companion, I care not, he had said, pressing a small purse into her hand. Only ensure no one connects you to the Ashcombe name. Now, with night falling and the tempest growing fiercer, that small purse remained clutched in her frozen fingers as she sought any shelter from the deluge. Her thin cloak, once a fine garment of blue wool, hung heavily from her shoulders, sodden and useless against the elements. A fallen tree provided momentary respite. Eleanor huddled beneath its massive trunk, drawing her knees to her chest as thunder crashed overhead. The accusations that had driven her from her home echoed louder than the storm, whispers of impropriety, of secret meetings, of a reputation beyond repair. None of it true. Yet the silence she had maintained in the face of it all had been taken as admission. The crack of a branch nearby startled her from her thoughts. Eleanor pressed herself against the rough bark, heart pounding as hoofbeats approached. A massive black stallion emerged from the gloom, its rider tall and imposing against the storm-dark sky. "Who goes there?" The voice was deep, commanding, accustomed to being obeyed. Eleanor remained silent, hoping to become invisible among the shadows and rain. The rider dismounted with fluid grace that belied his size. He approached slowly, one hand extended as though calming a frightened animal. "I mean you no harm," he said, his voice gentler now. But no one should be abroad in such weather. A flash of lightning illuminated his features. Strong, aristocratic, with eyes that seemed to see through pretense. Eleanor recognized him immediately, the Duke of Dunmire, whose estate bordered these woods. His reputation for fairness and reserve was well known throughout the county. "Your Grace," she managed, attempting a curtsy that her trembling limbs refused to complete. "You know me," he observed, studying her face. "Yet I cannot place you, though I sense you are no common traveler." He removed his heavy riding cloak and held it toward her. "Come, my home is near. You require warmth and shelter." Pride warred with necessity in Eleanor's chest. "I cannot impose." "It is no imposition to prevent death by exposure," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "And that is precisely what awaits you should you remain here." When she still hesitated, the Duke sighed. "I offer shelter, nothing more. My housekeeper will attend you. Your reputation, whatever it may be, is safe in my keeping." Something in his words, the acknowledgement that she had a reputation to protect, even as she huddled soaked and alone in his forest, broke through Eleanor's resistance. She accepted his cloak with numb fingers. "Eleanor Ashcombe," she said quietly, though perhaps that name means little now. A flash of recognition crossed his face, quickly masked. "Mount before me," he instructed, leading her to his horse. Dunmire Hall is but a quarter-hour's ride. The journey passed in silence, Eleanor too exhausted and cold to maintain conversation. The Duke's solid presence behind her was both reassuring and terrifying. A nobleman of his standing would surely know the rumors that had driven her from her home. Dunmire Hall emerged from the storm like a fortress, its stone walls and tall windows glowing with welcoming light. Servants appeared immediately as they approached, efficient and discreet under their master's commanding presence. "Mrs. Winters." The Duke addressed an older woman with a severe bun and kind eyes. "Lady Ashcombe requires immediate attention. A hot bath, dry clothes, and a warm meal in the blue guest chamber. Lady Ashcombe." Eleanor questioned weakly as the housekeeper led her away. "I hold no title." "The daughter of the late Viscount Ashcombe deserves the courtesy of her birth," he replied simply. "Rest now. We shall speak when you are recovered." That conversation came sooner than expected. Eleanor had barely finished the excellent soup Mrs. Winters had brought when a knock sounded at her door. The Duke entered at her acknowledgement, remaining near the threshold as though conscious of propriety. "I trust you find your accommodations satisfactory?" he inquired, his gaze assessing her improved condition. "More than generous, Your Grace." Eleanor's fingers twisted in the borrowed nightgown beneath her dressing gown. "Though I cannot understand why you would extend such kindness to a stranger. Can you not?" His expression remained unreadable. "I found a gentlewoman alone in a storm, clearly in distress. What man of honor would do otherwise? A man who values his reputation might think twice before sheltering someone like me," she replied, the words bitter on her tongue. The Duke's eyebrow rose slightly. "Someone like you? And what manner of person might that be, Miss Ashcombe? Surely you've heard the whispers. The Ashcombe scandal has provided entertainment for drawing rooms across 3 counties. I make it a policy not to form judgments based on drawing room gossip." He moved to the window, watching the storm that continued to rage. "Though I am aware your brother has been particularly vocal about certain indiscretions." Eleanor's cheeks burned. "Half-brother," she corrected automatically. "And he found it convenient to believe the worst." "Why were you in my forest, Miss Ashcombe?" The question was direct. His gaze now turned fully upon her. The truth spilled from her lips before she could consider discretion. "I was deposited there. My presence had become inconvenient to the family's ambitions. Abandoned," he clarified, a muscle tightening in his jaw. "To the elements, without protection or destination. I had a purse," she offered weakly, gesturing to the sodden bag that lay drying near the fire. The Duke's expression darkened. "A paltry sum, I imagine, to purchase your disappearance." His perception was unsettling. Eleanor turned away, unable to bear the weight of his gaze. "You needn't concern yourself with my troubles, Your Grace. Once the storm passes, I shall continue on my way." "To where?" he challenged. "To what end?" The question hung between them, unanswerable. Eleanor had no destination, no plan beyond the desperate need to escape the whispers and accusations. "You will remain at Dunmire until you are fully recovered," the Duke stated, his tone making it clear this was not a suggestion. "After that, we shall discuss more permanent arrangements. I cannot accept charity." "It is not charity to correct an injustice," he interrupted. "Whatever the truth of the rumors surrounding you, no one deserves abandonment in a storm." As he turned to leave, Eleanor found her voice once more. "Why would you risk association with someone of tarnished reputation? You, who are known for your careful neutrality in all matters." The Duke paused at the door, his profile stern in the firelight. Perhaps neutrality, when faced with clear wrongdoing, becomes its own form of injustice. His eyes met hers. "Rest, Miss Ashcombe. The storm rages still, but you are safe within these walls." The door closed behind him, leaving Eleanor to wonder at the strange turn her fate had taken, and why a powerful Duke would concern himself with the solitude of a disgraced young woman. 3 days passed before Eleanor felt strong enough to leave her chambers. The fever that had taken hold after her exposure to the elements had broken only yesterday, leaving her weak but determined to face her benefactor properly. Mrs. Winters had provided a simple but well-made gown of deep green, explaining the Duke had dispatched a servant to the village modiste with instructions to send several ready-made garments suitable for a gentlewoman. The thoughtfulness of this gesture, providing necessities without making her feel indebted, was not lost on Eleanor. She found the Duke in his study, a spacious room lined with books and dominated by a massive oak desk. He rose immediately upon her entrance, his expression revealing momentary surprise at her appearance. "Miss Ashcombe, I am pleased to see you recovered." He gestured to a chair near the fire. "Please, be seated. You should not overtax yourself." "Your hospitality has been most generous, Your Grace," Eleanor said, taking the offered seat. "I fear I've been a burden during my illness." "Not at all." He remained standing, his posture formal. "Mrs. Winters reports you were a model patient, far less demanding than many healthy guests who have occupied that chamber." A small silence fell between them, filled with unspoken questions. Eleanor gathered her courage. "I must ask, has my presence here become known beyond your household?" The Duke's gaze was steady. You fear further damage to your reputation. I fear damage to yours, she corrected. My own is beyond salvaging. Is it? He moved to pour 2 cups of tea from the service on a side table. I wonder if you truly believe that, or if you have simply accepted others' assessment of your worth. The observation struck uncomfortably close to truth. Eleanor accepted the tea with slightly trembling hands. When enough voices speak the same falsehood, it gains the weight of truth. And what is this falsehood that has condemned you? He asked, finally taking his seat across from her. Eleanor stared into her cup. That I entertained improper advances from my stepfather's business associate. That I encouraged his attentions to secure advantages for myself. Did you? The bluntness of his question startled her into looking up. No, I rejected his advances repeatedly. But when he claimed otherwise, when he suggested I had led him on only to cruelly dismiss him, it was his word against mine. And his word carried the weight of wealth and connection. The Duke nodded slowly. And your family chose to believe him. They chose convenience, Eleanor corrected bitterly. My half-brother has been negotiating a marriage alliance with the man's niece. My presence and my accusations complicated matters. So you were sacrificed for family ambition. His voice remained even, but Eleanor sensed a controlled anger beneath the words. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. The butler entered, his expression apologetic. Your Grace, Mr. Ashcombe has arrived and insists upon seeing you immediately. Eleanor's teacup clattered against its saucer. George is here. The Duke rose, his expression hardening. Show him to the blue parlor, Simmons. Inform him. I shall be with him shortly. As the butler withdrew, he turned to Eleanor. Your half-brother's timing is remarkable. He must have learned I'm here. Fear clutched at her throat. Perhaps someone saw you bringing me to Dunmire. More likely he has been searching since the storm. The Duke's voice was calm, reassuring. You need not see him if you do not wish it. The offer tempted her sorely. Yet Eleanor knew hiding would only reinforce the appearance of guilt. No, I would face him. But, she hesitated. I would ask that you allow me to speak with him alone first. Surprise flickered across the Duke's face. You are certain? I am. Eleanor straightened her shoulders. I've spent too long allowing others to speak for me, or about me. It is time I found my own voice. Something like respect gleamed in his eyes. Very well. But I shall be nearby should you require assistance. George Ashcombe paced the blue parlor like a caged animal, his fashionable attire at odds with his thunderous expression. He whirled as Eleanor entered. Momentary relief quickly replaced by anger. There you are. Do you have any idea of the trouble you've caused, disappearing into the night like some? He broke off, glancing around the elegant room. How did you come to be here, of all places? His Grace found me during the storm, Eleanor replied, keeping her voice steady. He offered shelter when my own family cast me out. George's face flushed. Don't be dramatic. I provided funds for your journey. A journey to nowhere, with no destination or purpose beyond removing me from sight. Eleanor felt a strange calm settle over her. Tell me, brother, have you secured your advantageous marriage yet? Is that why you've come? To ensure I don't interfere? I've come because you're my responsibility, he snapped. And finding you installed in a bachelor's home does nothing to dispel the rumors about your character. The Duke has been the perfect gentleman, Eleanor said firmly. Which is more than I can say, for the man whose lies you chose to believe over your own sister's word. George's expression hardened. We cannot afford the luxury of truth when our family's position hangs by a thread. You know, our finances depend on this alliance. So I am to be sacrificed for financial convenience. She stated it as fact, not question. You are to do your duty to the family name. He lowered his voice, attempting a more reasonable tone. Come, Eleanor. Return home with me now. We'll say you are visiting distant relatives. The scandal will fade if you simply remain quiet and modest. The Duke's voice came from the doorway, startling them both. And if she refuses? George turned, his face reddening further at being overheard. Your Grace, this is a family matter. It became my concern when I found Miss Ashcombe abandoned in my forest during a life-threatening storm, the Duke replied, his tone dangerously pleasant. I wonder what the magistrate would make of such treatment of a gentlewoman. You wouldn't dare bring such a trivial matter before authorities, George blustered, wouldn't I? The Duke entered the room fully, his presence commanding. I've remained neutral in many matters, Mr. Ashcombe. But I find I cannot maintain that stance when faced with clear injustice. Eleanor felt something shift within her at his words. The first stirrings of hope that perhaps her voice might actually be heard. George looked between them. Calculation replacing anger in his expression. I see. Well, if my sister has found such a powerful protector, perhaps we can reach an accommodation that benefits all parties. The Duke's expression remained impassive. Miss Ashcombe will remain at Dunmire Hall as my guest until she determines her own course. That is not negotiable. As George departed, his final glance at Eleanor carried a warning she understood all too well. The whispers would only grow louder now. But for the first time, she found herself caring less about their weight. Life at Dunmire Hall settled into an unexpected rhythm over the following weeks. Eleanor, determined not to be merely a recipient of charity, asked Mrs. Winters to assign her useful tasks. Soon she was helping manage household correspondence and assisting with the organization of the Duke's extensive library, work that engaged her mind and gave purpose to her days. The Duke himself remained something of an enigma. He treated her with unfailing courtesy, taking breakfast with her most mornings, and occasionally joining her for dinner, but maintained a careful distance that both relieved and, strangely, disappointed her. It was during one such breakfast that he made an unexpected proposal. "The gardens are at their best this time of year," he remarked, setting down his coffee cup. "Perhaps you might care to walk there this morning. The fresh air would do you good." Eleanor hesitated. Until now, she had confined herself to the house, aware that venturing onto the grounds might invite observation from neighbors or passing travelers. "I understand your concern," the Duke said, reading her expression. "But hiding away only reinforces the appearance of wrongdoing. You suggest I should simply ignore the consequences of being seen in your company?" Eleanor asked, genuinely curious about his reasoning. "I suggest that living in fear of judgment is its own form of prison." He rose from the table. "The West Garden is particularly fine at this hour. I often walk there myself before attending to correspondence." The invitation was clear, yet carefully phrased to leave her choice intact. After a moment's consideration, Eleanor nodded. "I should like to see it." The garden proved even more beautiful than promised, with early summer, roses climbing stone walls, and neat gravel paths winding between beds of lavender and foxglove. The Duke walked beside her, occasionally pointing out a particular plant or view, but otherwise allowing comfortable silence to exist between them. It was Eleanor who finally broached the subject that had hung unspoken between them. "Your Grace, I must ask, what is to become of me?" He glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "That depends largely on what you wish for yourself. My wishes have seldom factored into my circumstances," she replied. "Perhaps it is time they did." He stopped beside a stone bench, gesturing for her to sit. "Tell me, Miss Ashcombe, if you could choose any path forward, what would it be?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked for her desires in so long that Eleanor found herself momentarily speechless. "I would," she began hesitantly. "I would wish for a life of purpose, for the opportunity to be judged by my actions rather than by malicious whispers, for the chance to rebuild what was taken from me." The Duke nodded slowly. "Reasonable desires, all. But how would you achieve them?" "That is where reality intrudes," Eleanor admitted. "A woman alone, with a tarnished reputation and limited resources, has few options for honorable independence." "There are always options," he countered, "though some require greater courage than others." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by birdsong and the distant sound of gardeners at work. Eleanor studied her companion's profile, struck by the quiet strength he emanated. "May I ask you something, Your Grace?" "Of course." "Why have you remained uninvolved in county matters for so long? Your reputation for neutrality precedes you. Yet I've sensed a strong moral compass in our conversations." The question seemed to surprise him. He considered it for a long moment before answering. "After my father's death, I inherited not only his title but the consequences of his political entanglements. He had made powerful enemies through his outspoken positions. His gaze turned distant. I believed that by remaining neutral, by refusing to engage in petty conflicts, I could better serve justice in the long term. And now," Eleanor prompted when he fell silent, "now I wonder if silence in the face of clear wrongdoing is its own form of complicity." His eyes met hers. Your situation has forced me to reconsider many long-held principles. The following day brought an unexpected visitor, Lord Harrington, a magistrate and prominent figure in county affairs. Eleanor observed from the library window as he arrived, her heart sinking. Surely he had come to address the impropriety of her presence at Dunmire. When Mrs. Winters came to request her presence in the Duke's study, Eleanor steeled herself for confrontation. She found the two men in what appeared to be a serious discussion, which halted abruptly upon her entrance. "Ah, Miss Ashcombe." Lord Harrington greeted her with a formal bow. "I was just discussing with His Grace the unfortunate rumors circulating about your situation." "I see." Eleanor clasped her hands tightly to hide their trembling. "And what conclusion have you reached?" The magistrate glanced at the Duke. "His Grace suggests there might be a simple solution. A statement from my office regarding the falsity of the accusations against you, perhaps with some pressure, applied to the original accuser to recant." Eleanor's gaze flew to the Duke's face, hope rising within her. "You would do this?" To her surprise, the Duke shook his head. "I suggested it as a possibility, but I believe there is a better way forward, one that requires more courage, but yields more lasting results." "What way is that?" she asked. "The truth, spoken openly and without shame," he replied. "Not through whispered influence or behind closed doors arrangements, but through proper channels, where all can see justice done." Lord Harrington sighed. A formal hearing would be public, potentially embarrassing for all involved. A quiet word in the right ear would be far more efficient. "Efficiency is not justice," the Duke stated firmly, "and shadows only breed more shadows." In that moment, watching him refuse the easy solution that his position and influence could have secured, Eleanor felt something shift within her heart. This was a man who understood that true respect could not be built on convenient arrangements or protected reputations. It required the courage to stand in full light. "I agree with His Grace," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I have lived too long under the weight of whispers. If my name is to be cleared, let it be done where all can see." The county assembly, held annually at the town hall in Dunmire Village, was the social event of the summer season. Eleanor had attended many times in previous years, but never with such trepidation as she felt now, standing before the mirror in her chamber at Dunmire Hall. The gown the Duke had provided, a simple but elegant creation of deep blue silk, suited her perfectly, neither too ostentatious nor too modest. It made a statement of quiet dignity that matched her resolved state of mind. A soft knock at her door preceded Mrs. Winters' entrance. "His Grace asks if you are ready, Miss Ashcombe. The carriage is prepared." "As ready as I shall ever be," Eleanor replied, smoothing her skirts one final time, though I confess to some nervousness. The housekeeper's expression softened. "If I may speak plainly, miss, you have nothing to fear with His Grace beside you. I've served the Dunmire family for 30 years, and I've never seen the Duke take up a cause he didn't intend to see through completely." The words brought unexpected comfort. "Thank you, Mrs. Winters. That helps more than you know." The Duke awaited her in the entrance hall, resplendent in formal evening attire. His expression as she descended the stairs was unreadable, save for a brief flash of something that might have been admiration. "You look beautiful, Miss Ashcombe," he said simply. "Thank you, Your Grace." Eleanor managed a small smile. "And thank you for the gown. It is perfect for the occasion." "Are you certain you wish to do this?" he asked quietly as he handed her into the carriage. "There would be no shame in delaying your public appearance until matters are more settled." Eleanor shook her head. "Hiding only feeds the rumors. Besides, Lord Harrington has agreed to announce the formal inquiry into the accusations against me. Better that I am present to hear how the news is received." The Duke studied her face for a moment before nodding. "Your courage continues to impress me." The journey to the village passed quickly, filled with discussion of practical matters. Who would be present? What might be said? How they should respond to inevitable questions. By the time they arrived at the brightly lit town hall, Eleanor felt as prepared as she could be for the ordeal ahead. Still, nothing could have fully readied her for the immediate hush that fell as they entered the assembly room. Conversations halted mid-sentence, heads turned, and whispers began anew as the Duke of Dunmire escorted Eleanor Ashcombe into the heart of county society. She felt the weight of every stare, the judgment in every hastily averted gaze. Her half-brother George stood near the refreshment table, his face darkening with anger at her appearance. Beside him, the man whose lies had destroyed her reputation, Mr. Pembroke, looked equally displeased. "Breathe," the Duke murmured beside her. "Remember why we are here." Eleanor straightened her shoulders and moved forward with as much grace as she could muster. The crowd parted before them, no one quite willing to snub the Duke openly. Regardless of his companion, Lord Harrington approached, offering a formal bow. "Your Grace, Miss Ashcombe, I'm pleased you could attend." "As promised," the Duke replied. "Has there been any development in the matter we discussed?" "Indeed." The magistrate's voice carried just far enough to be heard by those nearest. "I've reviewed the initial statements regarding Miss Ashcombe's situation and found sufficient inconsistencies to warrant a formal inquiry. Mr. Pembroke will be called to provide evidence for his claims." A ripple of reaction spread through the nearby listeners. Eleanor kept her expression carefully neutral, though her heart raced at this public acknowledgement that her case deserved examination. "When will this inquiry take place?" the Duke asked. "Next Wednesday at the county courthouse," Lord Harrington replied. "I've already sent formal notifications to all parties involved." George Ashcombe pushed his way forward, his smile tight and false. "Lord Harrington, surely such a minor family matter needn't occupy the court's valuable time. I'm certain we can resolve any misunderstandings privately." "The damage to your sister's reputation was hardly private, Mr. Ashcombe," the Duke observed coldly. "Why should its resolution be conducted in shadows?" Before George could respond, Mr. Pembroke joined them, his florid face betraying his agitation. "This is preposterous. A gentleman's word questioned on the basis of a—" He caught himself, glancing at the Duke. "On such flimsy grounds. If your word is as solid as you claim, Mr. Pembroke, you should welcome the opportunity to state it under oath," Lord Harrington replied mildly. "Unless, of course, there is some reason you might hesitate to do so." The implied threat hung in the air. Sweat beaded on Pembroke's brow as he looked from face to face, finding no allies even in George Ashcombe, who had begun to edge away from the confrontation. The orchestra struck up a lively country dance, temporarily drawing attention away from their group. Eleanor released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Would you care to dance, Miss Ashcombe?" the Duke asked suddenly. The question startled her. "Dance? Why not?" His expression softened slightly. "Unless you would prefer to stand here being stared at for the remainder of the evening. Put that way, the choice was simple." Eleanor placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her to the dance floor. Couples shifted to make space, curiosity and speculation evident in every glance. As they took their positions, Eleanor whispered, "Everyone is watching us. Let them," he replied. Sometimes the most effective statement is the simplest one. They moved through the patterns of the dance with practiced ease, the Duke's hand firm and reassuring whenever it met hers. Gradually, Eleanor felt some of her tension ease. There was something powerful in this public appearance, not hiding, not apologizing, simply existing with quiet dignity in spaces that had once been comfortable and familiar. When the dance ended, they found themselves near the garden doors. The Duke guided her outside to a small terrace, where they might catch their breath away from the press of curious onlookers. "You're doing remarkably well," he told her, his voice warm with approval. "It feels strange," Eleanor admitted, "to be seen again after so long trying to make myself invisible." A commotion from inside drew their attention through the windows. They could see Mr. Pembroke engaged in a heated discussion with Lord Harrington, while George Ashcombe stood by, his expression increasingly alarmed. "It seems our presence has had the desired effect," the Duke observed. Confronted with the prospect of testifying under oath, Mr. Pembroke appears less confident in his story. "Will it be enough?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Truth has a way of emerging when properly encouraged," he replied. "But regardless of the outcome, you have already won a significant victory tonight." "How so?" "You've refused to be erased." His gaze was intent upon her face. That courage deserves recognition. As they prepared to re-enter the assembly room, the Duke paused, studying her with an expression Eleanor couldn't quite interpret. Then, with deliberate care, he took her hand and placed it upon his arm. "Why is a lady this beautiful standing alone?" he asked, his voice carrying just far enough to be heard by those nearest the doors. Before she could formulate a response, he continued, She should not be. Not tonight. Not ever again. The gesture was simple but unmistakable, a public declaration of support that went beyond mere escort duty. As they re-entered the room together, Eleanor felt the weight of judgment begin to lift, replaced by something she had not dared hope for. The possibility of redemption. The inquiry came and went with surprising swiftness. Faced with testifying under oath and confronted with the inconsistencies in his story, Mr. Pembroke recanted his accusations against Eleanor. He claimed misunderstanding and offered a public apology that, while clearly reluctant, was nevertheless official. George Ashcombe, seeing his carefully constructed narrative crumbling, attempted to salvage his dignity by suggesting he had always believed in his sister's innocence, but had been protecting her from gossip by removing her from society temporarily. No one believed him. But the formal clearing of Eleanor's name made it possible for polite society to pretend they did. Through it all, the Duke remained steadfast at Eleanor's side, present at the hearing, accompanying her on carefully chosen social calls, ensuring through his continued association that her reintegration into society could not be quietly obstructed. It was during a quiet evening at Dunmire Hall, 2 weeks after the hearing, that he finally broached the subject they had both been circling. "Your name is cleared," he observed, setting aside the book he had been attempting to read. "You are free to return to your family home, should you wish it." Eleanor looked up from her embroidery, studying his expression. "Is that what you believe I should do?" "I believe you should do whatever brings you peace and purpose," he replied. "My concern is that your options remain limited by circumstance, despite your vindication." "You mean that a woman alone, even with an unblemished reputation, has few paths available to her?" Eleanor set her needlework aside. "You're not wrong." The Duke rose, moving to stand before the fireplace. "I have been considering a solution that would benefit us both, though I hesitate to suggest it for fear you might feel obligated by gratitude." Understanding dawned slowly. "You're speaking of marriage." "I am." He turned to face her directly. "Not as rescue or charity, but as a partnership between equals who have come to respect one another." Eleanor's heart quickened. Most would call it a very unequal match. A duke and a disgraced gentlewoman with no fortune. Most have not had the privilege of seeing you face adversity with the courage and dignity you have shown. He approached, stopping a respectful distance from her chair. "I have no interest in what most would say. I'm interested in building a life with a woman of principle and strength. And if I were to accept such a proposal," Eleanor asked carefully, "would it be a marriage in name only? An arrangement of convenience?" The Duke's expression softened. "It would be whatever we chose to make of it. I would not presume to demand affection that must grow naturally, if it is to grow at all. But I would hope that mutual respect might provide fertile ground for deeper feelings to take root." The honesty of his answer moved her deeply. This was not a man given to pretty speeches or false promises. If he spoke of respect and potential affection, he meant exactly that. "I would need time to consider," she said finally. "This is not a decision to be made lightly." "Of course." He nodded, returning to his seat. "Take all the time you require." The following days brought clarity as Eleanor carefully weighed her options, returned to her family home, where she would forever be treated as damaged goods, seek a position as a companion or governess, forever at the mercy of employers' whims, or accept the hand of a man who had proven himself honorable, who offered not rescue but partnership. When she finally gave her answer, they were walking in the West Garden, where so many of their important conversations had occurred. "I accept your proposal," she said simply. "Not from gratitude, though I owe you much, but because I believe we could build something worthwhile together." The Duke's expression remained serious, though his eyes warmed. "I would not have you enter such a union with reservations. My only reservation is whether I can be the duchess your position requires," Eleanor admitted. "I was raised a gentleman's daughter, not an aristocrat's wife." "The title is mere circumstance of birth," he replied. "What matters is the character beneath it, and yours has been tested in ways few could withstand." Their wedding, held in the Dunmire village church, was a simple affair attended by select neighbors and a few of the Duke's relatives. George Ashcombe was notably absent, having suddenly discovered urgent business in London when the invitations were sent. As they exchanged vows, Eleanor found herself focusing not on the words, but on the hands that held hers. Strong, steady hands that had first reached out to her during a storm, offering not possession, but protection. The same hands that had publicly acknowledged her when others would have hidden her away. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, the Duke, now her husband, leaned close to whisper, "This is not an ending, but a beginning. We build from here, together." For the first time in longer than she could remember, Eleanor felt not merely safe, but seen, valued not despite her trials, but because of the strength they had revealed in her. Summer reached its zenith as Dunmire Village prepared for its annual festival. Traditionally, the Duke and Duchess opened the celebrations with a ceremonial lighting of the bonfire, followed by the first dance on the village green. This year, the ritual carried special significance. It would be Eleanor's first appearance as Duchess of Dunmire at a major public event, a test of the community's acceptance of her elevated position. "Are you nervous?" the Duke asked as their carriage approached the village, festooned with flowers and colorful banners. "A little," Eleanor admitted. "It's one thing to be accepted as your wife in principle, another to be embraced as your duchess in practice." He took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them over the past weeks. "They will love you as I have come to." The simple statement hung in the air between them, though they had grown increasingly comfortable in their marriage, sharing conversations, meals, and the management of the estate. Neither had spoken openly of love until this moment. Eleanor's fingers tightened around his. "Have you come to love me?" "I believe I began to love you the moment you insisted on facing your brother alone, despite your fear," he replied, his voice low and certain. "Your courage awakened something in me I had forgotten. The importance of standing visibly for what is right, not merely avoiding wrong." Warmth bloomed in Eleanor's chest. "I have loved you since the day you refused to solve my problems through quiet influence, when you insisted truth must stand in full light." Their carriage arrived at the village green before more could be said, but the knowledge traveled with them as they stepped down to greet the waiting crowd. The villagers cheered, genuine warmth in their welcome, as the Duke presented Eleanor formally as their Duchess. The festival proceeded with traditional games and competitions, food stalls offering local specialties, and musicians playing lively tunes that drew dancers to the green. Throughout it all, Eleanor moved with growing confidence, her husband's steady presence beside her, a reminder that she belonged here not by sufferance, but by right. As evening approached and preparations for the bonfire lighting began, an unexpected hush fell over the gathering. Eleanor turned to see the cause of the sudden silence and found herself face to face with George Ashcombe. "Sister," he greeted her stiffly, offering a formal bow. "Your Grace, I hope I am not intruding on your celebrations." "That depends entirely on your purpose in attending," the Duke replied, his tone courteous but cool. George shifted uncomfortably. "I've come to offer congratulations on your marriage, and to—" he glanced around at the watching villagers, "to make amends if possible." Eleanor studied her half-brother's face, searching for sincerity beneath the public performance. "Amends require truth, George. Are you prepared to speak it, even now?" A flicker of the old resentment crossed his features before he mastered himself. "I was wrong," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "I chose convenience over family loyalty. I allowed you to be sacrificed rather than risk confrontation." "And Mr. Pembroke," Eleanor pressed, "did you know his accusations were false when you accepted them?" George's gaze dropped. "I suspected, but his family's connection was valuable, and it seemed simpler to remove the source of conflict." "The source being me," Eleanor observed, her voice steady despite the old pain his admission rekindled. "Yes." George finally met her eyes directly. "I cannot undo what was done, but I can acknowledge it was wrong." The Duke's hand came to rest at the small of Eleanor's back, a silent gesture of support as she considered her response. Around them, the villagers watched and listened, this public reconciliation becoming part of local lore, even as it unfolded. "Thank you for your honesty," Eleanor said finally. "It is more valuable coming late than not at all." Relief washed over George's face. "Then you forgive me." "I am working toward forgiveness," she corrected gently. "It is a process, not a moment. But your acknowledgement helps that process begin." The tension that had gripped the gathering eased. As George withdrew to join the other spectators, the Duke leaned close to Eleanor's ear. "You continue to amaze me," he he murmured. That was both gracious and honest. A difficult balance to strike. I've had an excellent example in you, she replied. The warmth in her eyes meant only for him. As darkness fell, they performed the ceremonial lighting of the bonfire, together, their joined hands, holding the torch that set the carefully stacked wood ablaze. Flames leapt skyward, illuminating the faces of villagers and gentry alike in democratic golden light. The musicians struck up a traditional country dance, and the Duke led Eleanor to the center of the green as they took their positions. A memory surfaced from the county assembly months earlier, their first public dance, when whispers and judgment had followed their every move. How different it felt now. The same eyes watched them, but with acceptance rather than speculation. The same hands joined in the figures of the dance, but with confidence rather than trepidation. Do you remember? The Duke asked as they came together in the pattern of the dance. The first time I took your hand publicly, at the assembly, Eleanor nodded. You asked why a lady so beautiful stood alone. I knew then what I was beginning, he admitted. Though perhaps not where it would lead us. The dance brought them together again, their hands meeting briefly before the pattern separated them. And where has it led us? Eleanor asked when next they came close. To truth, he replied. To a life where neither of us stands alone. Later, as they walked together along the edge of the green, watching the villagers continue their celebrations, Eleanor felt the last weight of her past finally lift away. The whispers that had once defined her existence had been replaced by a single, clear truth. She was valued not despite her trials, but because of the strength they had revealed in her. Your hand, the Duke said suddenly, extending his own toward her. Eleanor placed her fingers in his, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. The first time I took it, it was to make a statement, he said quietly, to show others what I saw in you. And now, she asked. Now I take it for myself alone. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her fingers. Because I have found in you not only a wife, but a partner in all things. Eleanor stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing until she could feel the steady beat of his heart against her own. Then take it and keep it, she whispered, not for show, but for life. As the bonfire blazed and summer stars emerged above Dunmire village, the Duke and his Duchess stood hand in hand, no longer for the benefit of watching eyes, but for the simple joy of connection, freely chosen and freely given.